So, Lecture 11, Part 4. Catch up on our slides here. Whoops. Well, I overshot the last one, but the last one showed the bridge and the dam. So, in between recording these, I hopped out to that dispenser of all knowledge, Wikipedia, and brushed up real quick on the PWA because I said that the uh, Golden Gate Bridge and the Bay Bridge were both built during this time. So I did go check. They weren't they weren't PWA projects. Apparently, they actually were financed by the state of California. So they were built during this time period, and that's the kind of thing that the PWA did. Although apparently those two bridges actually were state projects. Um, but the PWA did build some bridges. They helped build the Lincoln Tunnel. Apparently, this is on Wiki, so yeah, you got to take it with a grain of half salt. But that was the kind of projects the PWA mostly did: dams, bridges, tunnels, really big ticket stuff. Okay? I also looked up the Civil Works Administration while I was at it. And yeah, it was mostly a temporary, minor project thing. Apparently, they did do a few larger projects. When I say larger, not PWA level stuff, but uh, you know, built a few roads here or there, maybe a few small buildings. I think I saw something about it, maybe a football field or something. So a little more than just raking leaves sometimes, but it's definitely a small term type project. One of the things on my list of things to do one of these days is read a good book about the New Deal. Uh, I've got this one here, won the Pulitzer Prize, right? Which usually means it's readable. Freedom from Fear. Uh, the American People in Depression and War. All right, it's a bit thick though, so might not get this one read for a while. Because when I tell you, when I'm done with a dissertation, I'm going to read something that has nothing to do with history. Maybe I'll read a novel. Anyway, I digress. So the PWA, big ticket stuff. CWA, smaller projects. Okay. Somewhere around this time, and I was trying to find which agency funded this, and I didn't find it. I didn't look real hard. They also built a couple of aircraft carriers for the United States Navy. Obviously, the Navy could use these aircraft carriers, but they were funded apparently instead of out of naval appropriations, funded as work projects. And these things might be handy to have, I don't know, in 5 or 6 years when the next war wanders around. But anyway, let's move on to the rest of our stuff. All right, so remember, we had reform, we had relief, recovery, and reform. So we get, remember, farmers have been struggling back since the days of the populist, right? And so Roosevelt will try to do something about farmers. So this would be, I guess, maybe a combination of relief and reform, perhaps. And some of these don't fit concretely into one R category. Okay? But they pass the first Agricultural Adjustment Act in 1933. So we're still in this first year of Roosevelt's administration. Very busy, like I said, first year. Actually, like I said, a lot of it passed in the first 100 days. Now, a perceptive young college student, if I say the first Agricultural Adjustment Act, might occur to you that, it must be a second one, or they wouldn't have that number in front. And yeah, they do. What the first Agricultural Adjustment Act, which was originally just the Agricultural Adjustment Act, of course, basically put the government in the business of subsidizing farming. Okay, they were trying to stabilize crop prices. They would actually pay people to take some land out of production. Okay, because you know how farmers are going to plant. We've talked about this. They plant all their acreage because they don't know what their yields will be. And so maybe the government comes to them and say, look, why don't you only plant 75% of your acreage, and we'll pay you what you would have made growing on the other 25%. I don't know the exact particulars of this program, honestly. I'm not a New Deal specialist. I know people who are. I'm not one of them. Okay? This would give the farmers some guaranteed income. They could take certain land out of cultivation. You'll plant grass or something so the land could recover. All right. And it would actually reduce the supply of some commodities and help stabilize the prices. Okay. Now, the Agricultural Adjustment Act was later ruled unconstitutional by the Supreme Court because of certain provisions of it, and so it will go away, okay, and then later be replaced with another version. That's why they've added the one in front. Okay. Now here's a picture, by the way. This doesn't fit with any of these captions up there, but it shows FDR with Henry Wallace. Now, Henry Wallace was one of his vice presidents, okay, and before he was vice president, he had a lower role in the administration, if I recall. And I've looked at this picture for like 10 years, and then it occurred to me, well, like a year or two ago, I'm looking at it while I'm lecturing, and it dawned on me. It says FDR with Henry Wallace in the Shenandoah Valley, Virginia. Okay? And I glanced at it and realized all these guys here behind Roosevelt for the photo op, yes, they're all dressed exactly the same. They're like in dungarees or coveralls. But I noticed down here on the table they're eating lunch. These are canteen cups. Kind of hard to see. It's easier to see when you're in the big PowerPoint screen in the classroom. And these are mess kits. Okay? And it suddenly dawned on me, this was probably taken at a CCC camp. Remember I told you the Army ran the CCC camps? Okay? So we got a bunch of young men, all dressed the same, and there's the president eating out of Army mess gear. This picture was almost certainly taken at a CCC camp during a visit. Anyway, back to item number 5, a National Industrial Recovery Act. Now, if we were doing the essay question and you were trying to categorize these programs into R's, this one would be recovery. If you get this one wrong, it is pretty bad because it says recovery right in the title. All right. Now, this was a really complicated act. What they were trying to do was plan out and stabilize the industrial part of the economy a little bit. Okay? Now, I'll be honest, I've never read a book on the NIRA. I'm sure someone's probably written one. It's probably very dull, but one of these days, if I live to be 300, I could read all this stuff. There's probably something in it about that big, thick book. But the NIRA was going to try to stabilize the situation. Here's how I imagine it might work. Let's say that the United States has the capacity to build, 300,000 widgets per year. But the government looks at the situation and says, look, it's a depression. We're probably only going to need 100,000 widgets next year. If all of our widget manufacturers build to their full capacity, we'll have a glut and the prices will go down and then people will be unemployed and go bankrupt. So the NIRA was an attempt to plan the economy. Assign, well, you build this and you build that. Okay, or how many of these do you need? It also had a lot of rules in it that involved labor and management, help management labor relations. There is a political cartoon that shows up in one of the textbooks. I don't remember if it's in ours or one of the other ones I've used, showing Uncle Sam, the symbol of the United States, with two people on either side. One's in a suit, says management. The other one's in a work clothes, says worker, and they're all doing this. They're buddy, working together to try to get things done. So the NIRA had a lot of labor laws buried in it as well. It was a very complex law. And there's actually a poster that goes with this. The NIRA, the National Industrial Recovery Act, is overseen by the NRA. Now, this is not the National Rifle Association. That's a different crap. Well, I was going to try to erase the little red squiggly lines. I hit the wrong thing. Here's the eraser. Whoop. But anyway, you saw the poster for a second, the Blue Eagle, NRA. That's the National Recovery Administration. They oversee the NIRA. Okay? But this is an attempt to plan the economy. It doesn't work. It's too complex. There's too many moving parts. The Soviet Union used to try this with 5-year plans, and they always failed miserably because there's too many variables. So the NRA, wasn't working. And then what happened is the Supreme Court also ruled the NIRA was unconstitutional. Parts of it are rejuvenated later and passed in different bits of legislation, which is one reason I'm vague on what exactly is in it, because some of it goes away when the Supreme Court rules it unconstitutional, but then they salvage bits and pieces of it and put it into some later labor legislation, what we'll get to in another couple of slides. Okay, so the AAA ruled unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. The NIRA ruled unconstitutional by the Supreme Court, and it wasn't really working anyway, so they just kind of said, okay, well, whatever. All right. A program that's not quite as big a deal, but we're going to mention it anyway. This is one of the ones I've talked about getting out of, but it's something that shows the government doing something new. Okay, so I'm going to keep it. It's the Homeowners Loan Act in 1933. So the Homeowners Loan Act. All right. So you've got a depression. People have lost their jobs. They can't pay their mortgages. They don't pay their mortgages. The bank can foreclose on the house. Now here's the deal. People like to portray the big evil banks as wanting to foreclose on your house. Honestly, they don't want to foreclose on your house. They want you to make the payments on your house. Because if they foreclose on your house, now they've got a house they've got to sell. Now, if you're in a market where real estate keeps going up, that may not be so bad, but we're in the middle of a depression. So the bank ends up owning, a whole bunch of houses in town, and nobody has any jobs. This is not good for the banks, and the banks are already struggling. So the Homeowners Loan Act is something that the government did. They basically come in and refinance your mortgage. So let's say you've taken out a 30-year loan on your house. You're 5 years in. Now you're underemployed. Okay, you're making less money. You can't make the monthly payments. The government comes in, refinances the house for a new period of time. Lower payments, lower monthly payments. Now they pay the bank as I understand it, they paid the bank in government bonds. Well, the bank wasn't originally going to get all the money at once anyway, or all they were expected anyway. So instead, they get bonds. All right. So the bank's happy; they still got their money. The homeowner's happy; they get to stay in the house. Now the government's floating the note, but this program, as I understand, was very successful because almost everybody who took out one of these mortgages was eventually able to pay it back. So it really only cost the government the administrative cost of operating the program. So it helped keep people in their houses, helped keep the banks from getting stuck with a bunch of dead weight property they couldn't sell. And so this program is usually portrayed as being fairly successful, whereas, as I said, the NIRA wasn't working very well. So once again, Roosevelt's kind of trying and I keep saying Roosevelt. Of course, Congress has to pass most of this legislation, but the administration gets people who are on their side, listens to ideas, and gets things introduced. Okay. I need to wrap this one up because I see the timer's ticking away. I'm almost past the point it'll fit. I think I can get the Tennessee Valley Authority in here real quick. We'll give it a try. The Tennessee Valley is prone to flooding. It's also very underdeveloped. Sparse population. A lot of people don't have electricity because the population density is not enough to justify running the cost of the lines back in there. So the government comes in and builds a whole bunch of dams. Okay, it's known as the TVA. Okay, the TVA builds dams. These dams their main purpose is flood control to protect the valley from flooding, but they have other benefits as well. All these guys down here, these are workers, okay, building the dams. So those are jobs. They also put electrical generating capability into these dams so they can generate electricity to help electrify the Tennessee Valley. So this program, these dams are still there. Usually seen as pretty successful. It's very expensive. You can't do this very many places because there's only certain parts of the country that are prone to it or set up for it. They talked about doing another one up in like Washington, Oregon, but they never did. So the TVA usually seen as a successful program. Okay. We're going to have to wrap this up. This is the end of video 4.